Hey, 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 everybody. It is 5 o'clock, and you know what that means. It is time to hear me. Somebody you've been waiting for all week, I hope. It's Happy Hour with Dr. Lisa. I am Dr. Lisa Liggins Chambers. I am a psychologist. I am here to join you for the next 50 minutes to an hour to talk about all of the experiences that I've had with children who can't see ghosts. So thank you for joining me live today. If you are on Instagram, if you are on Facebook, I am live there. And you can also hear me on Podbean. So thank you so much for joining. If you want to chime in and talk to me, you can absolutely do so on Podbean. If you also have questions for me, the number is 765-205 1959, or you can catch me on email, which is kidscanseeghosts@gmail.com. So I am all over social media. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it works for me for the podcast and for also the blog. So the best way to keep up with this podcast is to join my blog. You can find my blog at lisaligginschambers.com. So LISALIGGINS Chambers, CHAMBERS.com. So I look forward to hearing from you on one of those platforms. You can also call in live on Podbean if you would like to join me on the podcast if you want to discuss your experiences as well. So, we've had a lot to talk about over the past, let's see, we're already on volume 30. So I've done this 30 times and we're on blog 21. So blog 21 is all about parents. I was thinking about this blog and decided to title it Parents Just Don't Understand. Like the Will Smith song, dun 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 dun. Parents just don't understand. After a while, that's how I started to think about parents, that it was growing increasingly harder over time to understand parents of children who can see ghosts. Those parents are not nebulous parents. So let's be clear about that. Nebulous parents are the ones who can actually see ghosts themselves. For example, Child B, in earlier blogs, her parents could actually see ghosts, so they were nebulous parents. I'm talking about all parents. When you work with kids, you can't touch them. There's nothing you can do with kids unless you have permission from their parents. So I've worked with, I'm going to say at this point, hundreds of parents. And so there are some parents who could see ghosts, and some who, like me, are parents but cannot see ghosts. And some of those parents were also parents of children who could see ghosts. I am not one. My kids do not see ghosts. As far as I know, they do not. So I'm speaking of the general population of parents that I worked with, and there were a lot of them. And so the more that I started working with kids who can see ghosts, I had to start almost categorizing parents because there were so many different personalities of parents who I was starting to work with these children. And so there was a point in time in my career when I started thinking, boy, this is really serious. It's serious because it seemed for a long time that these were the only kids that were coming under my care. So there were other children, and there were a lot of other children who would come under my care. But for some reason, I always felt like, at least from probably 2004 through about 2000, I think 19, so a long time, at least 15 years, that I kept working with nebulous children. And that's why I have so many stories to tell you, because I continuously have these type of children and families under my care. And so it's always a pleasure to work with any parents. But what was striking about parents of children who could see ghosts is that it was really easy for me when they would come to see me to put them in categories and put them in categories because there were certain personality traits that the parents would have. And that would actually either help me deal with the parents or it would not. And so it's kind of like I knew what I was dealing with if I categorize them that way, if you will. And so it is also how I began to draw conclusions about what was going to happen with these kids. So, overall, when it became serious to me, it meant that I had to start spending more time learning about the parents as well, because the parents, all parents, I always say, for example, mothers are the umbilical cords to a child's life, you know, and obviously dads are too, but I'm just speaking of the mother. So a lot of times the mothers would bring these children to see me, and either they could help me work with these kids because I could get them on board, you know, with the type of treatment, or they would rebel and push back because seeing ghosts was just so weird to them. And you have to give them, you know, respect for that, because if you think about it, there aren't a lot of people talking about, you know, kids that can see ghosts. But I kept dealing with them over and over again, and I'm not going to reject a child um, or the parents of a child. So, you know, that's why it became serious to me. You know, I had to sit back, I had to study, I had to talk to pastors, you know, I had to talk to parents who could see ghosts. I really had to partner with parents, and not all of them were easy to deal with. You know, when your kids are distressed, it can cause you distress as well. And so, if you can imagine, a lot of the parents were skeptical of what their kids said they can do. For example, imaginary friends. You know, a lot of parents would say, "Are these imaginary friends?" And I would kind of go, you know, having to tease out, you know, what was true of these kids and what was not true. So it was really challenging, and that's why for me to take on what kind of personality I was dealing with the parents. And that's not a bad thing. We hear about personality disorders all the time, and that's not a bad thing. So I'm not talking about personality disorders. So let's be clear about that. You know, these parents aren't categorized into, you know, psychiatric personality disorders. These are just different personality types that I dealt with. And before we go into that, I want to tell you all that it was really interesting too, because some of the parents who could see ghosts will often use me as a little experiment to prove to me that they actually could do this. And I'll tell you how they did it, because it was funny. Um, and the only reason I knew that what they were telling me is true, because remember, I had a lot of kids who would tell me the same things over and over again. And I'll remind you that we cannot share. This stuff is confidential, you know, and I never did walk into a situation with kids asking them flat out, can you see ghosts? I wouldn't do that. And I still don't do that. When these things were told to me, it was because they wanted to tell me. You know, I don't know a counselor or a therapist or a psychologist or social worker alive who would just look at a kid and say, you can see ghosts. We don't do that. So this was information that was told to me, and it was told to me in different settings, in different states, and at different times. It's not something that I can reveal. So remember that. And so what would happen is um, the parents would come in sometimes when they feel comfortable and start telling me about the different things that were around me. And this was a pattern. So a lot of parents did this, where they would just come in and say, oh, you have a lot of angels around you. Or they would say, oh, there's one behind you. Each time, every time, when they were comfortable and in different states and sometimes out of the country, this would continue to happen. And honestly, it was to the point where I would just kind of go, oh my God, this is happening again, because it was just so unreal. And so a lot of people would hear me talk about these things over the years, even if I didn't disclose them publicly, because this was so different. We don't learn about this stuff in school. You know, we don't learn that there are, you know, people out there who have the ability to see ghosts, or we don't even learn if parapsychology is real. So this was all different. But to survive in it, I realized I had to start categorizing what I was dealing with, right? So here we go. So parental personalities were divided into 4 different areas for me. And as a sidebar, what's interesting about this is that I still have this stuff written down. Like, I still, believe it or not, I still have notes, evaluations, testing data. I still have all of it. And I didn't even, when I started these blogs, I didn't even realize I had it. I actually found that stuff while I was on the phone with my best friend. And I was like, oh my God, I still have all of this stuff. So I haven't used it yet, but I did tap into it to look up how I dealt with the parents because I wanted to share it with all of you. So here's what I did. There were certain parents that came in who believed their children. And let me just give you a disclaimer. I'm not talking about parents who believe that ghosts exist. And I should have put that in the blog. I am talking about parents who strictly believe that their kids could see ghosts. Okay? So again, this is parents who believe that their kids can see ghosts. So we had parents who believed their kids. Then we had parents who did not believe their kids. Then we had parents who believed their kids but could not see ghosts. And then here's the caveat. We had parents who could see ghosts and believe their kids. So 4 different personality types that I dealt with over and over and over again with these kids. So let's talk about the parents. Who do you guys think would be the easiest for me to deal with? I mean, you would probably say parents who could see ghosts, right? That is not true. They were the hardest to deal with. So let's talk about parents who believe their kids. These were the parents. Let me give you an example of these parents. Child A's mother is an example. Child A's mother believed, but she was also a parent who could not see ghosts. So there were some parents who believed their kids and could see ghosts, but there were some who believed their kids and could not see. And then there were some who were like, this is hogwash, to say it nicely. There are no such thing as ghosts. My parents don't see a damn thing. I mean, my kids don't see a damn thing but what's in front of their eyes. Okay. So this parent, child A's parent, actually believed her child, but she could not see ghosts. Parents who believed, sometimes they were kind of indifferent. Okay. They believed but were skeptical. They believed their kids and wanted them to have treatment because they could see that this was different. They believed, but they wondered, do they have mental health impairments, or is this just an imaginary friend, or what's really happening to my kid? Some of the things they did realize was that no matter what they did to comfort their child, or no matter what they tried, any type of interventions, even at school, this, what they thought was a fascination with ghosts, never went away. It just never went away. It was constant. And so that's what prompted them to get their kids some help. Their kids were frightened. These are some of the same symptoms we see in kids who have no ability to see ghosts, but it's just a little bit different. And I'll tell you why in a minute. These are kids who are telling their parents that they're scared. They are constantly not sleeping or sleeping with their parents, not turning the lights on. These are things that those of us that have kids who can't see ghosts, we see these things in our kids, right? My kid, my youngest child, still talks about the monsters at night, right? He says monsters, though, it's different. He doesn't say ghosts. Let's be clear about that. These kids say there's a ghost in my closet. These kids say there's a ghost at the foot of my bed. These kids say I don't want the lights off because the ghosts come, right? Which can still sound like fantasy, that it was different because these kids have told their parents things a little bit deeper. And it was always, my kid has seen my deceased grandmother, what she had on, can smell her, talks to her, it comforts her at night, different things like that. These kids were, Dr. Lisa has an angel around her. These kids were, there's a dark angel trying to get in the door when I'm with Dr. Lisa, but it can't. Mom, there's a dark angel, downstairs in the kitchen. And I don't want to go in the kitchen. When you turn a nightlight on at night, most kids who see monsters are satisfied. A nightlight didn't help these kids. You see the difference? This is very confusing. You see, even talking to you guys, it sounds confusing. It's because it is to these parents. But these parents would say there's something there. There's something there, and I don't know what to do about it. I'm very confused. So these parents who believe their kids had a vested interest in their mental health treatment, but there was a part of them who still believed that this was delusional, or this was the kids' imaginations, or these were cartoon characters, and that they also have mental health concerns. Okay. So these were parents who were like, distinguish for us between if this is really from the spiritual realm or if this is just their reality based upon a mental health impairment. So these were actually the parents who were open to what we explored together with their kid. And let me tell you, I would know whether these kids were using their imagination or not because I had gone through it so much with parents. And remember, there were certain things that I could do to kind of test out the kids to determine whether they were lying or not. No, all the kids saw some of the same things in the building where I worked. And it wasn't just one building. It was, remember, the 4 buildings. And then it was also in Illinois, but it was also in St. Louis for different companies. So these weren't just quote unquote ghosts that were convenient to kids when I was at one place. These were actually ghosts that they would see all the time around me, no matter where I was, and different kids. So at some point, if you're a scientist, and psychology is a science, keep that in mind, and I do believe in science. At some point, you're going to start thinking there's some realness to them, right? Realness to this, and you take it at face value. And that's what happened to me. I started thinking, all right, there's some truth to this because no matter where I go, these kids are seeing the same stuff, right? And they're seeing the same stuff around me. When it comes to mental health, that is always a priority. That priority doesn't change. So let me give you an example. If child A was telling me that he wanted to end his life because he was tired of seeing ghosts, that's different. That's a mental health concern. Everyone who's ever seen a psychologist, been around a psychologist or a social worker or a therapist, you guys know that a trigger for us is I want to end my life. Okay. There's certain triggers, certain verbiage, certain interruptions that will make us go, wait a minute, and assess it further. Another one is if somebody is harming you. Remember the little girl that I told you guys about who was running out to the forest, scared the crap out of me. Yeah, I disclosed that to her parents. I'm never going to be okay with a young child running into the forest by themselves. That is a risk of what? That's a safety risk. I didn't really know, even if she said it was ghosts, I didn't really know if it truly was her seeing ghosts or some, person telling her, waving to her, like, come to the car. but it's just in the forest. So and if it impacts their daily living, which is huge. So if think about depression, it makes people feel not just sad, but as if they cannot get out of that. Those of us who get sad are sad and then it's gone. Individuals with depression can't get rid of it. Okay. And so it's different, and depression will impact their daily living. And so I am always a psychologist first. But when you have a phenomenon like this and it keeps happening, you have to change what you do to make yourself more empathetic towards what these kids are going through. And so I had to start being empathetic toward parents, because there were times, and I would admit, when the parents would just brush off their kids and say, hey, this is just your imagination. Dr. Lisa, do something about it because my kid must have a delusional disorder. Stop looking up mental health online. Google is not your mental health friend. We are the professionals who are trained to deal with it. And so that's kind of what they would do. But here's a sidebar. If you do go to Google, you'll see countless stories about children who could see ghosts and what their parents have done, to help them. And some of it was mental health. And then you have some parents who believe their kids, but didn't really want to do too much about it. And that actually is not a good idea either. So these parents who believe their kids were often torn. They were often torn between what's reality and what's the spiritual realm, and which one was their kid's reality, and what did they need to do about it to help their kid. So that was the first personality with parents. The second one is parents who did not believe. They did not believe that their kids can see ghosts. And actually, parents who just completely did not believe were actually easier than the parents who could actually see ghosts. You figure that one out, because that was striking for me, and it still is. Well, sometimes when I go back and look at the blogs, I think, yeah, because I can tell you countless stories about parents who just were like, do something because I don't believe this. And think about it. There are a lot of kids who keep this stuff quiet. Why? Because society won't believe them, right? So I look at one of my websites, and there are people who do respond and say, hey, my daughter or my son or people have told me I was a nebulous kid. I could see ghosts when I was a kid, and it gave me anxiety because no one would believe me. And that's how these parents were. They would just completely write it off. It's kind of like just dropping the kids off to me and saying, you do something about it because I don't believe my kid can see ghosts. Working with them, as I mentioned in the blog, was very cut and dry. I really could not talk to them about their kids being able to see ghosts, period. And you have to respect that. Even if you don't like the direction, and we're not just talking about kids who can see ghosts, we're also talking about working with individuals and mental health overall. You have to respect if they don't believe something that you believe in. Religion is a big one. You're going to work with people who are not as religious as you are, or who don't believe in religion, organized religion, or they use religion in a different way. I've dealt with people who practice witchcraft. I've dealt with people who are from other countries, and I'm trying to think of one in particular, what they practice. Not a witch doctor. I can't think of a name, but it's a priestess. I know that. I just can't think of the name. But anyway, this person did that to treat their kid for autism. You have to respect those things, even if you don't want to. No, it's not voodoo. It was more of a high priestess. They went back to their country because they felt like, American practices for whatever their kid was going through wouldn't work. And so I actually had to respect the fact that I knew this kid had autism or was on the spectrum, but the parents wanted their high priestess, and I just can't think of the name right now, to see if they had another way of treating. But obviously, what happened is when they got back to America, the same things happened with the kid in school. Come back to me, put some things in place for autism, and those things have did help their child. But you have to respect that, and it's really hard. So, what I did with these kids is that I had to respect their parents. So, these kids sometimes would get treatment by me and would tell me, and it's gonna sound bad, but it is what it is, would tell me that they see ghosts, but would not, want me to tell their parents. Was I obligated to tell their parents? Even legally? No. As long as they weren't harming themselves or it was harming them, or what? They were gonna hurt someone else, okay? They could tell me all day long that they saw ghosts. Some of the kids wouldn't reveal this at all to anyone but me because I believed them, you know? And so when I would talk to these parents or give them a summary of things that were going on with the kids or working, I didn't add any feedback or any treatment or any techniques that worked with their kids to help them understand their abilities. I just couldn't share it. It is what it is. I couldn't share it. And I couldn't share it because these parents sometimes would get really upset with their kids. They would only believe that their kids were mentally ill. I thought it was such a disservice to their kids. Such a disservice. Sometimes you can tell the parents politely how their line of thinking, if you will, impacts their kids, but you have to know how to do it and you have to tread lightly with parents sometimes. Um, with some of the parents, some of the kids that worked, I could gradually ease them into um, feeling better about talking to their parents over time because I would have to work with the parents. And we have to do that quite a bit. We have to work with the parents. So we almost had to get them on board so that even if they didn't believe their kids, at least their kids could talk to them about it. See, these are the parents who not only didn't believe, but they didn't want their kids even disclosing it to anyone. So I was a safe person for the kids to disclose it to. And what the parents would think was that some of their symptoms were decreasing because they were talking about, their mental health ailments with me or challenges they were having in school, things like that. But sometimes we were really talking about how to control or get rid of some of, for example, dark angels that were plaguing these kids. It had gotten that deep. Can you believe that? And sometimes we just couldn't talk about it with the parents at all. And I wanted to. I wanted to embrace that. I want to embrace that now. But there are just people out there who are completely against any type of paranormal activity. Um, and the kids when they feel safe or when they felt safe to talk about their abilities with me, that's what they would continue to talk about over and over and over again. So I even had to, with the kids, I even had to try to find a way to bridge that or give them the time to talk about seeing ghosts 15-20 minutes, and then 20 minutes will go into actual treatment, and that was okay because that's what they needed. Or I would have to figure out how to, like in their treatment plans, how to give them time to just get it out of their system and to help them with, with their gifts without even touching treatment sometimes. So it was definitely tricky. And I had to tread lightly a lot. I would always encourage the kids to continue to talk to their parents about these things. But if they had parents who would reject this overall, I would tell them their parents aren't ready and just hold off on talking about it. The other thing I would have to do is to discuss with the kids not to talk about it at school as much because of how other kids would treat them. I actually just experienced this. This is November, sometime in October. And I meant to tell you all about that. I don't talk too much about kids that I work with now because I work with them now. And so I don't do that. But I will say, I did have one say something to me that made me go, if you saw me on camera, look at the kid twice, because I thought to myself, I've heard that before. Uh-oh, in my head. And I can't tell anyone. And I looked again and I was thinking, okay, I might have another nebulous child on my hands. So that just happened recently within the last 30 days. And I said, well, you can't tell people everything. You just can't. You tell people things that are harming you. You tell people if people are harming you. So if somebody hits you, you tell people that. You tell your parents that, or somebody's safe. There were times when I had to tell kids, you know what? All you want to do is tell your parents that you can see ghosts and they reject it. So now you got to find another safe person to talk to. So if you are a therapist or a psychologist or a psychiatrist, you're going to come across a kid like this at some point. If they tell you something as simple as I can see ghosts, the worst thing you can do is to reject them. And I tried to tell parents that, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. Okay? So those are the parents who did not believe their kids. So if we go on to parents who believed who could not see, they were. I just had one of those parents flash in my head. That's why I was laughing. But these are the parents who were fun to me. And they were fun because they were just like, oh my God, my kid can do this. My kid can see ghosts. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. How you see mediums on TV, and sometimes they have reality shows and they talk about how they can talk to dead people, and there are people like, ooh, oh my God, this is so amazing. Can you talk to my deceased spouse, or where is he, what is he doing, is he's around me? I don't know about you guys, but that stuff I used to think, I don't want my relative talking to me through someone. That's just scary to me. And so these are those parents who were like so supportive. God bless them. You have to love them. They were so supportive. They were supportive. They were so excited about their kids' ability. And it was pretty cute to me because they would go, okay, little Johnny, show Dr. Lisa you can see ghosts. What's over there? Or let's go outside. Show her right there. I know you can do it right now on the spot because you do it all the time. What's that? But the funny thing is some of these kids would be like, yeah, that's a dark angel. That's something that you don't want to see, Mom. And it's watching from the window and it can't come in because Dr. Lisa's prayed them away from her in the office. So when they got to, I told you, one of my jobs really had some strong paranormal activity in all of the buildings. And so this is a kid who is like, yeah, there's a little ghost boy running down the hallway, and the mom would be like, oh, joy! There's a little ghost boy. What is he doing? Does he want to come close to me? Oh my God, he's just a boy. And this kind of like, they always felt really happy about this ability. And so you have to understand that this was a little tricky though. This was a little tricky for me because these were the parents, sometimes the dads too. I would have to grab their little hands and say, hold on, hold on, hold on. I know you're happy, but we have to teach your kid how to control this because your kid is going down in the basement frightened because your child is seeing a bunch of dark spirits. Kids, again, call them dark angels. Most adults will say demons. If you Google dark angels, you'll see it all over the internet, which was fascinating to me because I actually didn't know that this existed until I met these kids and that it was a big thing and all over the internet, you know. And so it is dark angels. And so these are the kids who wanted to please their parents. So the parents would say, "Oh, just let me ask little Johnny um what happened to my uncle when he was in a car accident." And some of these kids could actually answer that stuff because they are seeing dark angels who are telling them, right? Remember, I said that they can manipulate? So they're not actually seeing God's angels, they're seeing dark angels who are saying, yeah, this is what happened. So you have to be careful with what you bring into spiritually, what you bring into your home and what you ask for in your life. Remember that demons are not your friends. And so this was also a pattern with grandmas who believe because they would just go, oh, this is just a good thing. Go ahead. Tell all the grandmas in the bingo room that you can see ghosts, sweetie. Grandma's right here, and grandma will totally support you. Listen, everybody, my little Johnny can see ghosts, but you know what would happen with that? Little Johnny would just cry in therapy. Cry. These kids would be so stressed out because they would be put on the spot and it would be so embarrassing because now the neighborhood knows Johnny can see ghosts and the kids are doing what to little Johnny at school? You're a freak, you can see ghosts. Okay? So they would over and over and over again had to prove to people that they could see ghosts. And what's interesting is that I know a lot of parents who could see ghosts themselves who would say it was really hard to go to school and see ghosts, and people would know you can see ghosts because people have told them, and people would tease me, or um, you know, I would be forced to do quote unquote readings for people. When these kids aren't psychics, they're listening to things you don't want them to listen to. So it was, and harm is a strong word, but I can't think of another one now. It was almost, you know what I'll say? Hurtful. It was hurtful toward them. And so one of the things that I had to do with parents who believe their kids and who were really happy about it, I had to remind them that this is a gift to their kids, but we need to teach them how to, use it as a gift. But also that you have to stop telling people and putting them in the position of what? Having to tell everybody. Tell everybody. You can work with a parent like this because they're really happy, right? But I almost had to restructure their thinking because of their happiness, and I actually think back to some of these situations and giggle sometimes because I could picture some of the moms who were just overjoyed. Child A is an example of that. Child B is also an example, but child B's parents could see ghosts. And there were several of them that I'll talk about, keep talking about whose parents could actually see and those who couldn't. And so making them share this information was hard for these kids, and they weren't ready to share it with everyone. Not all the time. But there were some kids who were very secure in this. But imagine being a little kid and you can see all this stuff and you're saying, hey, they follow me to school, and at school I see this stuff and I don't necessarily want to see it, or I don't understand why everybody else can't see it, but you're making me tell everybody, even in bingo, that I can do this. You see how it was hurtful toward these kids, or it can be? They were almost, it's kind of like, your dad or your mom forces you to wear, stuff you don't want to wear in school, and you got to walk around. I've been there too. You have to walk around with this stuff on, like, oh man, that's how they felt about seeing ghosts. Okay. So these kids had no choice to come to me from their parents, and their parents said, look, just look, my kid can do this. Just look. And I was like, I get it. But your kid is also really sad. Look, you're sad. Your kid's sad. Okay. Your kid's not functioning too well. So those are the parents who believe but could not see. And then you had the parents who could see. Oh my God. You would think that parents who could see ghosts themselves would be easy. Good Lord. They were not easy. They weren't easy on me either. They always had to tell me what was around me. So imagine being a psychologist or working with people, because a lot of you, even if you aren't therapists, a lot of you work with people, from policemen and women to fire women and men, to, teachers around kids all the time. And then you have parents who could see, who are sitting there telling you, you know what? There's an angel behind you as we speak. Or, when you walked outside last night and got in your car, your angel was on your car sitting with you to protect you. Or, ooh, there's a demon who's looking at you from right across the street from your house. And so I don't want you to go over to your neighbor's house across the street because it watches you when you pull up from home. I've heard this stuff from these parents. And it was really challenging sometimes, because I didn't always want to know what they could see around me. And there were times that it was so scary that I didn't tell my coworkers, or I didn't tell my friends who were also in the field of psychology, because I didn't want to frighten them. Actually, one of them just texted me a few minutes ago, and I was thinking, this is some of the story that I didn't tell her because I didn't want her to be scared, although she knows about all of these stories. And so some of the parents could see what was also in my house. They would say stuff like, you had an angel visit you last night, and so did your husband when you guys were sleeping. It's just like, wait a minute. You can see us sleeping at night? How do you think that made me feel as a therapist? I have strong boundaries. Like, I don't even put pictures of my family up in my offices. I've never done that because I have such strong boundaries. There were parents who would say, there was a ghost. There was an angel, your husband's angel. I'll never forget this. Your husband's angel visited him last night. It's a male. And then your angel was there. And some said, oh, you have angels that guard your children, and they watch over them when they're sleeping. Oh, I actually wrote about this. I'm looking at the blog. I didn't know I wrote about that. I write the stuff and I forget. Yeah. So that's what would happen. I'm sorry, I didn't even realize I wrote it in the blog. I'm sitting here glancing at it like, oh, I wrote that. And so I remember that parent, and I remember at that moment thinking, you could see what I was doing last night. So that's why I say some of the parents had abilities that I don't even know what they were. Some people call them psychics, but I already told you how I feel about that. So I don't know what the ability was, but they would have a whole host of other visions. And so these parents were actually a little more challenging for me. Fascinating, fascinating. But sometimes I didn't want to know all about that spiritual information. And it would usually come out when they were very comfortable with me. And I had to work very closely with these parents, because I had to understand, if you can see ghosts, why aren't you helping your own kids? Right? Isn't that a legitimate question? If you can see ghosts and you can see your kids talking to a dark angel, that's something that I can't do. And you can see the dark angel. What's wrong with you? And why can't you get rid of it? Or why can't you help your own kid? Well, let's pause right there and talk about why. And it was easy. It was because the kids would have significant mental health concerns. So, consistent fighting at school, saying that dark angels are telling them to just go around hitting people, being suspended from the bus because the dark angels are telling them to just load off and fight, bringing weapons to school. They told me to protect myself. So you see how even some of these parents who could see ghosts themselves are going, I try to pull my kid from being influenced by these dark angels. I see them, but I'm afraid that this has turned into something more because of the dark angel. So it was like, I'm thinking about it now, getting a headache. I remember feeling that way, like, ay, with these parents, because they could see everything. So treating those kids obviously was different, right? It was different because I could tag team easier with the parents because the parents could actually help me help the kids because the parents could actually see. They were really good at telling me more detail about the visions that their kids saw, and they were really great historians. These were the parents who could say, "Oh no, I remember when my kid was 3 years old and wasn't talking, was pointing to stuff and doing this and doing that and going, there's something in the closet or this or that." And I would look and say, "Yeah, there's an angel in the closet," or "Yeah, there's a group of ghosts trying to talk to us because we can all see ghosts." It's just kind of like, whoa. So they were great historians, but it took a lot of skill and a lot of balance to structure these parents because they knew too much. They knew too much. And these are also the parents who sometimes had a hard time focusing. There was just something about me. It was just something about me because they would have a hard time focusing. And what that means is they would constantly want to talk to me about me. And I don't do that. Some of them I actually had to refer out because it was too much conversation about me, which was breaking a boundary for me, and they wouldn't stop, some of them. And so you do have to be aware of that too. And if they cannot get proper treatment from you, then you do, and it's okay to talk to them and refer them out because some of these families, I didn't think that I was helping well because they were so focused on me. I was like, my God. And that's not a good thing. And it wasn't them being in my personal life or asking me, they just knew too much, and it was uncomfortable. The parents that I could continue to work with understood that they had to keep some of that stuff to themselves. Um, and it was a boundary that they understood and they did. I did not always want to hear about stuff that was around me too. And so we'll keep talking about these parents because these are actually all the parents are interesting, but these are the ones that were such great ghost interpreters. That's what I'm going to tell you about next week. Um, and they were the ones who were very captivating, if you will. Difficult, but captivating. So we'll talk more about them next week. And then, if you are following the blog, we will go straight into blog 22, which I think is where I am answering all kinds of questions that people ask me. Before we leave, I am going to answer one question that came in, and it is, how do you know when paranormal activity crosses into mental health and when mental health crosses into paranormal activity? And I picked that question because I thought it went hand in hand with parents just don't understand. Remember, psychologists first, so mental health first, then, working with the paranormal. They sometimes go hand in hand, but when it crosses over is when, again, it significantly impacts a person's life, meaning mental health, when there are true mental health concerns, such as harming other people. You always have to be a therapist, psychologist, psychiatrist, social worker. You always have to be that first, and you never, ever relinquish your ethical duty, ever. You always make that known. And in helping these kind of individuals, what you have to do is you have to be keenly aware of when mental health is divided from paranormal activity. Kids can see ghosts, but they don't always have mental health impairments. Individuals with mental health impairments do not always have the ability to see ghosts or interact in any type of paranormal activity. So it is challenging, but there is a difference. And there are some disorders that I believe do have some relevance in reference to paranormal activity. So hopefully I answered that question properly for you. If not, ask it again and tell me to be more detailed. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining me. And you guys have a wonderful night.